Hello, everyone, and tonight we're talking about Meeting C++ and C++ user groups, and we're celebrating 14 years of Meeting C++ because 14 years ago, I launched a website and I had to make an announcement that there is a new C++ conference. And oh boy, it's been a wild ride since then. So from the start, my concept was that there's a Meeting C++ conference that supports C++ user groups, but also I wanted to make this a platform that shares news and blogs about C++, right? That was really important to me, and it became really important to me, especially in the second year when people were starting to tell me, well, you're not going to be as successful as last year because all the C++ developers came to your conference already. And so you need to, just that made it to me clear that I need to reach out to all the other C++ developers. And also that one of my goals with the C++ user groups was to build a network for C++ that, the C++ user groups are our connection into the real world, the folks which, ground the C++ community to their local communities. And I myself started to share C++ content through my own blog on Meeting C++. And I picked up speaking myself. I spoke for a long time at C++ conferences, was going to CPPCon and to C++ Now and other conferences I've been visiting and speaking. And of course, also I've been speaking at Meeting C++. So I've recently not done that as much because it's like giving a talk at my own conference. Easy peasy, I just give a talk to me, fine. But then I have to deal with running the conference at the same time and having the stress to also be in a room and give a talk. So I rather, I have my roles, and I leave the speaking mostly to the speakers nowadays. Let's talk quickly about this year's conference, Meeting C++ 2026, 14th conference? No, 15th conference. 15th conference, we have 5 tracks, 4 in Berlin, 1 online, last week of November or last weekend of November, start of Christmas time. The program is just out. It's really interesting. Robert Szymkowicz will join us in the panel later. And yeah, so the program really is like really what to look forward into C++ 26. Switching to C++ 23, we have a talk on that. You want to have the same C++, but quicker to the finish line, we are covering you that too. We have some AI talks, and I will talk a bit about AI later, and just all throughout the talk, sometimes it keeps creeping up. So there's a bunch of, we have some new speakers, old speakers, experienced speakers, famous speakers. It's a good mix, right? And all those 14 years, basically, Meeting C++ could exist because the conference supported and funded my work for the C++ community through the ticket sales. And for 14 years, this has kind of worked out. And when you run a conference for 14 years, of course, it's not always working out. So thank you for your support. And thank you for, coming, especially those, who have bought tickets, and also those who have given talks. And if we scroll back, there's, Daniela. Daniela came for a long time as a normal supporting attendee and paying her ticket and being happy every year, but also being very knowledgeable and very motivated about C++. She became a speaker and has given now also a keynote or multiple keynotes at lots of conferences. She does also a lot of traveling, and also she's in the committee. So that's really like one of our big stories with Meeting C++, and there's many other stories in this, what came through the community. But in recent years, less folks are making the trip to Berlin, and when you get your funding from the conference, that is a bit of a problem. Reasons for that is, one of the big reasons is surely AI, that the impression is there that why do you need to give people training if they now have the all-knowing fantastic AI, which we might, just can fire half of our staff if we have that super AI. And I see that this year a lot of AI is going about token cost, and that AI is not as perfect as it is seen in some circles, and that I see a bit of a trend that AI is like, doing the thing in the hype cycle, which things do in the hype cycle. The other big problem was basically the pandemic, just generally downsizing every conference, having also budget and travel budget cuts, having a recession in Europe and especially in Germany didn't help when you run a conference in Germany, and hiring. People are still hiring, but for the first 10 years where I run Meeting C++, basically everyone is like searching for C++ developers because they're so hard to find, and that is over. It's literally like they're having too many candidates. Their issue is to find good quality candidates, and while I would have that, it's really difficult to convince them that I have that, right? And so I don't want to work as a headhunter. I don't want to like do full-time work as hiring, etc. So that will have its time again. The other thing is new conferences are competing with Meeting C++, and hence also, people make the decision to go somewhere else. And as one of those conferences is in a country which didn't have C++ conferences before, I actually can quantify that for Meeting C++. So there's a significant amount of people from that country not showing anymore up. And I guess there's a lot more people from that country going to the conference than people coming to Berlin. But for us, it's, of course, a problem when we have the budget missing and not replacing it. But then if you go forward, this year, it seems to be things are a bit better than 2025, which really wasn't that great. Folks from teams seem to be sent to the conference again. And often it feels like that people send the team or one person per team and not companies just, drawing one or two lucky people to come to the conference and like, you better tell us everything about C++ after your 3 days in Berlin. And so that's kind of something which makes me happy. Yet last year still has left its scars in me, because a big problem in October, where we usually have a lot of sales, was that budgets got frozen, and September and October sales were not what they should be, and folks finding out that basically the plans they had for Berlin didn't match out for them because budget was frozen. And last year it was also the tariffs which nobody planned for, and this year, well, energy prices, etc. We seem to kind of get along. But the trend I see this year is that we are a bit better than last year, and that people are actually investing again in sending people and training people, which is nice. Also, I've been thinking about changing things for myself and how things work out, especially how I can prepare for when the conference isn't really, bringing everything I need. So it's too early to announce things, and it takes a bit longer than I thought. But yeah, I'm working kind of on my own materials, so I'm potentially giving workshops and trainings in the future. Maybe in the first half of this year, we'll have the first things going on. I thought about contract work, but if I go on a contract for half a year, which pays really well, which would be really nice, Meeting C++ will suffer from that. And I still think that my role with Meeting C++ is really important. And this year, again, it looks like things are working out again. So contract work is something which I know will do a kind of damage to Meeting C++, which I rather not do. So we'll see. But maybe there's the right form of contract work for me to do something on the side, which also would be nice. Brings me back to the conference. This year's program is out. Take a look at it. And if you want to come to Berlin, it's actually really nice and really rare thing. We are in this week, and we are on that Thursday. That Thursday is also Thanksgiving, so that means some of the more famous speakers, or especially US speakers, are not coming due to Thanksgiving, and that means we don't have so many US speakers, I thought, but there's actually quite a lot of folks in the US which seem to be not caring as much as others. But also for general in American culture, it's a big no-no. It's like, it's Thanksgiving, I don't have time. But for some Americans, we actually now have speakers coming from that, which a bit surprises me, but fine. Next year will be earlier again. But let's talk about meeting C++ and user groups. So the root of my conference is actually the C++ user group Düsseldorf, which I think I established in 2011 or 2010. Prior to that, I did already do community work for MeeGo and other C++ mobile OS. Bada was one of them, which you probably never heard. And MeeGo is like a term which also some people remember. Intel and especially Nokia were working on that. And MeeGo was supposed to power phones first and then later netbooks. And it kind of got me started in organizing local meetups and meetings and giving talks on this. And sometimes we had like a normal session, like doing a user group. Sometimes we just met at a bar. It was an interesting time, and it was interesting to meet a lot of people and talk just about, those meetings, and went on to talk a lot about Linux. And sometimes we talked about C++. And my takeaway from that time was to do more into like C++ itself and do a C++ user group. It also got me into working with like bigger corporations and for their marketing departments. That's nice, but also I wanted to be more independent from that. And that's kind of why meeting C++ is so independent, not sponsor focused sometimes, which changed a bit in the recent years. The trend really goes into sponsoring, which is also nice to see the support coming along there. Also, I've been visiting C++ now 2012. And to my surprise, I was meeting lots of other folks from Europe and especially Germany there, and talking about the conference and user group plans. I talked myself into doing the conference. I realized like halfway through the conference, I was like, well, all those people are not going to be on the same plane back, right? So I better do this now, because I want to come back here. And if I come back here next year and I don't do it, everyone's going to ask me what happened. And so I rather come back here and do it, and then everybody still will ask me what happened. But they actually were in 2013 quite happy, and that's how people started talking about CPPCon actually, because they saw, wow, you did a conference and you had more people at your conference than at C++ Now in 2012. I had like 150 visitors coming, 150 attendees. That was pretty cool. And having such a success then also motivated me to keep doing it. And I've been doing it about 14 years. And for that time, I've been doing talks about C++ user groups. During the meeting C++ update, which is now something I established a while back to just have some spot at the conference to talk about meeting C++, because I felt like I should have some point where I talk about my work, because it's basically the room that pays me. I've done the last talks about that at CPPCon, but also in 2013, I submitted a talk to C++ Now, which was accepted. But I mentioned that I'd like to have a co-speaker, and I didn't mention John Cobb, but I basically gave a description about someone who is also organizing user groups and knows what he's doing, etc. So if you read the description, maybe you didn't get it, but when John read it, he clearly knew that I meant him, and so we gave an evening session about that. That was great. Also, I remember John saying when I last year I thought Jens is insane and starting a new conference from scratch. That's like not how John works, and at least back then. And then he got the courage to start with a lot of other folks CPPCon. And so also I thought that the network and the things we were building is a good use to spread the news about C++, but also C++ user groups. So if you start a new user group, I will just be able to post a link to, it's usually Meetup, and people will come there and show up. And that's not always like local folks, but people which are interested in your group. And I've been doing the monthly posts on upcoming C++ user groups for a while. But in 2023, something broke. Meetup required a login. So my crawler was now locked out, and I didn't want to implement like a login and password for my account, etc. So no monthly postings. I remember not being too sad about that because the post-pandemic phase wasn't too easy for myself, and it wasn't an easy time for C++ user groups. There was a lot of groups which were inactive. Some groups got active again, but often it was like 1 or 3 meetings, and then they were done again. And you can see that in my listing, actually, where is the last active meeting. It's quite a lot of groups which, either completely stopped working or haven't been active since then. And so in this year, I thought about I figured out that Meetup was accessible again, and that I could basically just parse the website, and I could write an HTML parser, and that would be an exciting project in C++ to do. But then I thought, well, if that's the case, I just test if my parser is working again, and it's actually working. So my crawler is working again with the parser behind it, and so I can reuse all this infrastructure. And also, I'm motivated because I think we are again in a time where it's worth thinking about starting a user group. We're starting a new era. We have lots of stuff to talk about. We have 26. We have 29. We have security features which are actually being worked on at, right? It's not like that security, we point at Rust and say, oh, that's something else, which is not that much important anymore. We're actually taking this serious now. We actually have the committee work on stuff like that. And those features are now shipping. It's great to see. Reflection brings a lot of opportunities, and everyone is talking right now about reflection. If you feel like about it, that's nice to see. And then there's contracts, there's RCU, lots of other features. There's STD execution, which is already accessible in Compiler Explorer if you know what to look for. There's a library for it. And GCC 16 makes right now available tons of C++ 16 26 features. So C++ 26 basically is available to you with GCC 16. One of the things not shipping is STD execution. But you have other ways of playing around with that. That's fine. But generally, we have 26. Technically, C++ 26 is, by the way, not released yet. ISO is just doing its work there. And from the recent work on past standards, probably at the conference, we hope that this is like have the official seal and release from ISO, which basically is just bureaucracy. Nothing will change. ISO is basically the committee has shipped the standard, and ISO now basically has to put a stamp on it, and that's it. And I go back here. And there's new things coming up to Meeting C++. I thought about hosting those user group organizer panels because I do have tons of the user groups in the database. So that gives folks a place to talk about things and also to ask questions. New organizers, other organizers can join us. And recently, and I've announced it yesterday, this is the news plan. I've talked to C++ professors about this. We're hosting now a student showcase. And the first showcase is in 2 weeks at the 16th July. And I'm really excited about that. And then we'll see how that goes. But I think every second month we have like 4 to 8 slots filled for this. And then we easily can have people give lightning talks. It's kind of like a lightning talk feature as a format. And they talk about what projects they did and problems they solved with C++. This will be fantastic. So let's talk about starting, supporting, and or running a local C++ user group. This is kind of the C++ user groups as they were in Europe in 2018. And for years, I had this map at Meeting C++. There's an update from 2019 for this probably. In recent years, I've stopped using this map because it's just, it's distorted, and people always like complaining that the things are not like exactly at the city, and it's difficult to place it without having the city name or some tool doing it, which is one of the things which I'm thinking about, having actually a tool to draw those dots and then having the map from, But this kind of shows us how many user groups we had. And I don't have a map for this year for what we are at currently. Some of those groups, of course, are not active anymore, and others are still active. But this is what we had. This is basically, when everything, 2019 was a pinnacle, was a peak of the whole community meeting. And well, 2020, we had a pandemic, and this kind of, put a wrench on things. So things have changed. The pandemic is over. If you haven't noticed, join your local group. If there's an active local group, right? There should be an active C++ user group. If that is, then join. Talk to the organizers what support they need. Attending is already good enough, but maybe you want to speak, maybe you want to host at your employer, or have some space in mind, or some format you want to do. It's always, organizers are always happy to have people help them. And if you want to become an organizer yourself, that's also something which is often, there's roles to do. And of course, maybe you're one of those cities where we had a user group, but it's inactive now. Getting access to an inactive meetup can be difficult. Sometimes you can achieve it if you can reach the organizers, but if you can't, then it kind of can be difficult. And I think for Sydney, there's even the case that people don't want to give up the asset of the group because there's so many people in there, and they could reach out to that. And maybe one day they want to restart the group, but right now they're not seeing that. And so in these situations, starting your own group is an option. Trying to restart or to take over a meetup group is, of course, having the big advantage that you have all the people which have already been there in the past at your fingertip, and you can write to them. And that is a big advantage. If you start your own group, you also, work only with those which are coming to this new group on Meetup. And you can start without knowing anybody. Timo Dumlo talked to me about, moving to Helsinki and thinking about, there's no user group. I'd like to start one, but I'm new in the city, and hosting, he felt like difficult or wasn't sure about how to start and how to host, how to find a place to host. And also, Scandinavia and Finland, some people say that there has like not as social culture there, or things are more difficult. Definitely there's a cultural thing in every country, right, going on. And Timo is not from Finland, so he's just not sure how to do things in Finland. And oh boy, I'm not an expert on how Helsinki works, or how the Finns do their C++ user groups, right? So what to do? My advice, and I think that's great advice nowadays when you start a meetup, is I was like, the best way is to get to know people, to start a meetup and to invite them to a local bar, have some drinks, maybe have dinner, have food, and people will come, they will start talking, and you will automatically, be able to build a structure from that. And I think that's generally a great idea. And I think it's also not a big problem that people pay for their own food and drinks, but if you're the organizer, if people leave and don't pay for their food, then that's on you. But I think it's not a big problem. And so that's a really nice way to spend an evening at a bar or a restaurant and have some folks show up and just start your user group. And maybe also, those first people showing up might be interested to help you out. Maybe they want to host at their employer. Maybe they know some place where you could host in some hackerspace. All that, and we will talk about these things. So, but first, just what is a C++ user group? So a local C++ user group in my definition, and this is from the talk I gave at CPPCon, and this slide is probably older than the talk in 2019. It's by some definition local. It's a connection to the real world, right? It's in a city or in a local area. It has an audience and speakers from that area. It has regular meetings, like once per month, once per quarter. You can take a break, that's fine, but just generally, keep on going is important. It offers opportunities like to share C++ knowledge, to have people come there and know something which they didn't know about C++, to network and to just be social with your community, with other people working at C++, and to build a local network where also people transition to other people, and people find new jobs at C++ user groups, and generally, basically, reach out to your local community. And so let's talk about getting started with this. All right. At the start, you need to have kind of a receipt, right? This is like the elements which get you started. You need people. You need a place and location to host things, to have people come there, right? You need to be able to present something. But if you're just meeting in a bar and people are just talking to each other and having drinks and just socializing, that's fine too. Then the content element becomes later important, because you don't want, you could run in theory that's your group, right? If you want to do that, that's fine. Just have a local bar meetup about C++, might work out fine. But if you want to host talks, etc., that will become a thing. And then, of course, you got to get started. You got to have your first meeting. Otherwise, this is just theory. So let's talk about people. The attendees, they have all levels. You have folks which are just starting, maybe people which are students, to experts. And as you are the organizer, you will be seen as an expert, but you don't need to be one. We'll talk about that in a minute. Basically, the people who are coming are your target audience, right? And folks like to plan ahead, so decide on dates early, publish on Meetup. Try to have your topics to be diverse and not always like talk about the most popular thing or something, that will attract more folks and a more diverse audience and give you a more successful user group. As an organizer, you do not have to be a C++ expert. You're more the manager of the group. So your roles are like location contact. If you're hosting somewhere, you probably also have a contact for that. Content planner, next meeting, what do we do? Moderation, greet everyone, tell them what is new in C++, maybe entertain them a bit, and then introduce the speaker of the evening. And of course, greeter, social moderation, etc. And there's more to do if you want to, have more of things. There's also speakers. Well, if you're the organizer, you're probably also going to be the speaker at your group. And I've just heard from Robert that he basically started his group to have that he basically uses his group to polish his speaking, and that he's basically, also kind of, that's one of his motivations for that. And the C++ user group Vienna, which he runs, is also now going quite well for some time. Folks from university are always great for having to give talks. They have their material, usually their slides. They're used to standing before an audience and just speak. So if you can have folks from universities, if there's like local people willing to do that, that's great. And motivate your audience to pick up the microphone and just to start speaking or to start doing things for the user group, which can be seen as content. And on speaking, famous folks, of course, pull in more audience, right? And if you mostly host these, it might get difficult to have normal folks pick up the mic to start speaking. And I personally think like that a C++ user group should mostly try to have local speakers and to, of course, like, maybe there is somebody who's famous in your area or just is a conference speaker. Not every conference speaker is famous, like Robert, for example. But like, it's like for my own user group, we sometimes had Nikolai Yusufzadeh come in and give a talk and have a discussion with him. It was really interesting, really nice. We had some other people, which I don't remember now, over all the years, more than 10 years I've run the user group. It was quite interesting. And we had, once we had like people sponsoring pizzas, and the pizzas came late. So kind of we had the talk finished and then the pizzas came. And so the kind of folks and the kind of topics you host are setting the expectations for your group. And then kind of, where do you find your audience? Your own network, especially at the beginning, will be limited to your coworkers and your friends. And it's very nice to start a user group with them, but you want to have people come from the outside and, word of mouth spreading. So post something on social media, let the internet know. There's groups about C++ on LinkedIn where you can share that. You might want to write an email to me. Some people have done that in the past, and it was really a good idea because I can share it. I can also share it on other platforms. And when you're on Meetup, I can add you to my crawler, and then your meetings will show up on Meeting C++. Local forums and chats are another thing. And there's just like, you have to know, it's like, what's the things where you communicate or get the news from for your town, for your city, for your area. And most of the user groups also use Meetup, and that's where like the critical mass of folks still is. It's a great source of new folks joining for your group. Not all of them will be local, and not all of them will show up. And so that always is kind of a source for building your network and reaching out to people. Also, like, yeah, Meetup costs something, and if your group gets bigger, it gets, I think, I'm not sure, but there's alternatives, and I hope that we get to the point where we don't have to see Meetup as a go-to place. Quick word on locations. Bar, restaurant, I already mentioned. Universities can be good to host if you have the contacts, or you're being basically at a university and you just can host there. My user group was hosted all the years in a hackerspace, and that was nice. Employers hosting is also a good option. But employers were much more keen on hosting when the hiring folks were just like seeing this as a cheap gig to get people to the company and tell them that they have open positions. It's not as easy anymore because I already spoke about hiring right now not being as great as it used to be in that perspective. Of course, you also can, there's conference rooms you can rent if you want to spend money on this. There's other options. Conference rooms, of course, have the ability to just, have a projector and give talks. But then you're hosting in a professional environment, which will have its costs, and then you basically have to think about how to recoup those costs. Meetup has introduced some features of that, but I've not heard anybody use this. Maybe that's a topic for the panel tonight. And then you have the content, which is not just talks. You can do coding dojos, you can do interviews, you can do lightning talks, you can do video interviews, you can do a book club, you can do a debate, which the book club basically is just a great way to start a debate and a discussion about the things in the book. Conference trip reports have become also a popular thing which people do. Robert told me that it's something which he does at his group. And then there's talks, which is like the default. It's like every user group does it, and that's mostly what user groups do. You don't have to do that, but there's alternatives. But of course, you can mix that up. Lightning talks, for example, have the big disadvantage that you need a lot of lightning talks to fill an evening. But if you offer like 2 lightning talk slots or 3 just in front of talks, then you might have more success with lightning talks to have actually people pick this up, and you can always kind of, have a default to then go into being more social when you don't have a talk. And talks are usually, people that give talks, and they give talks on stuff they want to talk about, which is new C++ features. Maybe they write a library. That's really nice to talk about that. Maybe they, will want to talk about updating their library to C++ 23. And there's also like audience specific. And when you see us, like when you run a user group for a certain time, you see that like, some people show up for certain topics, and some people will not show up when you give a Qt talk, but you will have people using Qt coming, and then you talk about the new C++ features, and other people are coming. Yeah, so AI, it can be a good content, right? It's something which is interesting to people and will attract some sort of audience. I do see in our community also criticism that these people which talk about AI usually do not also have a critical view on AI, and that would help them to give better talks on AI. Also from this year's voting and last year's voting, where we had submissions on AI, I can tell you that at least the audience which Meeting C++ reaches is not too keen on AI topics. So I chose last year not to say these talks are going to the conference, but this year I kind of realized that I want to have the AI topics at the conference to just, help people to justify their trip if they need that. They can learn something about AI now, and maybe they need that to come to the conference. Also, I do have this on-site attendee voting, so I kind of can learn from this year's program how the on-site attendees, which are actually more important to the conference than what other people think outside on the internet, think about the topic. And also, I think that in a certain way, AI is here to stay. Maybe it's a bubble and it bursts and then just becomes a normal tool. And that's all the other thought I had on the general non-performance of AI and the voting, that most tooling topics and most topics which are not central C++, which are C++ and something else, often don't do too well if it's not like build system in C++ or some social thing in C++, like team management, etc. seems to do sometimes well, but we'll see. And then you got to actually get things started. You don't have an ideal date for that. You can do a poll, you can ask a lot of people, and you get a lot of opinions. Ultimately, you as the organizer decide when to meet and how it fits in your schedule, right? And maybe you want to avoid holiday times, but if you're starting to just host stuff in a restaurant, holiday times might not be the worst thing to do, but just less folks will come to that, and then maybe it's a good way to start a routine. December can be hard because people are already busy with everything, and some user groups choose to not do anything. Some people do a quiz or just generally a holiday celebration. And yeah, so when you start, you won't fill a room at the beginning directly when you don't have like a very good speaker at the start directly, but then you run into the problem that you need someone for the second meetup of your group, and you don't have it. Then the fluctuation is something which you directly will see. It's quite common. If you meet regularly, it helps picking a regular date, but often, like especially like for my user group at the hackerspace, the hackerspace had like one slot available for us, and that was always the same slot. And it didn't change over the years. It could have changed, but didn't. And I think it was the third Wednesday when we met, and the second Tuesday would also be fine. And if you can, try to announce the next meeting with a topic within your meeting, if you can do it. if you can, then it's also kind of good to say, let's like kind of when we want to meet, and is anybody here which would like to talk about something? What would be interesting to you? And that's also great advice to talk to your audience, what they want to see, what they're interested in, so that you kind of know in which direction you might want to go. But it's also the case that, of course, it would be interesting to hear something about like SDD execution, right? Everybody wants to hear about that. But finding someone who knows enough to actually, give a talk about that or speak about that and be knowledgeable and feel comfortable on stage might be difficult. So that is not always a good match. What I'm trying to say. On addendas, at the beginning, give folks time to arrive, because some folks will be late, and so don't directly start your meeting. So give some time to socialize. You can start with a welcome message like I do. That also is a great opportunity to tell people what you're doing and what is the topic of tonight, and like if you have multiple talks. And it's a great opportunity just for you as an organizer, address your audience and advertise the things you want from them and what you do and so on, right? And you should cover the content in the way you want to address the audience, which your speaker will not do, like cover breaks, cover food, cover drinks, and endless room for questions and socializing after your meeting. But also, like, when you have the welcome message and then you start to talk, you need to have kind of a bit of a setup, because technical problems will be common and people need to set up their notebooks and test it and stuff like that. We've all seen that, right? We've all done it in IT. And that's how you start a C++ user group.